Check the description for the following discount codes. I've spent most of this week testing this new Logitech G Pro direct drive wheelbase and of course the wheel that comes with it. And I've got to say, they've done a great job for the most part. The Logitech series of force feedback wheels, you know, the G25, G27, G920 and G923 and then the console equivalents have been a sim racing staple for like a decade or possibly more now. And some of those wheelbases, you know, the mechanical plastic cogs, they're still going strong even today. And they're still a good choice as an entry-level wheelbase, you know, for anyone out there that's got a low budget, entry-level budget and just wants something with half decent force feedback. This, of course, is direct drive, 11 Newton meters. And that puts it, you know, above the sort of Fanatec CSL DD and the Moser R9 as far as torque levels go, but below something like the Fanatec DD1 and DD2, and of course your Simicube alternatives, etc. as well. So it's kind of in its own little niche power-wise. We've got the Alpha Mini's about 10 as well, something like that. Price of this thing, £1,000 basically in the UK. So it is a little on the heavy side with regards to the price tag. The quality isn't. Where shall I start this review? We'll look around things first. Let me just get this wheel off here. Oh, in fact, well, as you just see there, the quick release is really nice and easy to get on and off. There's no smacking yourself in the face like I do with my DD1, even after having it well over a year. Every time I try and remove a wheel from that, you really have to wiggle it and be aware that it's going to come fly and hit you in the face. This, it slides on, you don't have to do anything, literally just pushes on like that, and then you obviously just slide it off like that. Very, very smooth, no resistance really, but at the same time, I've not noticed any play in it at all. It's completely solid. So the quick release is great. That wasn't what I planned on starting the review talking about, but as we've taken it on and off, I may as well mention it. Oh, I suppose I may as well go into a bit more detail as well. We've got some sort of, I think they're called like pogo pins inside there. They're just sprung loaded pins that make contact, and get this out of the way, with with the copper contacts just inside here. This piece here is also sprung and kind of floating. What that means is it acts almost like, not like strain relief, but with a little bit of compliance both there and with the pogo pins. You're not going to get any sort of metal fatigue or mechanical fatigue or failure from taking your wheels on and off loads of times, because they act like a cushion almost. So that's a nice little touch as well. The wheelbase itself, 1080 degrees. It's the first force feedback. It's the first direct drive wheel I've seen that actually has a mechanical full stop, so to speak. You know, most direct drive wheels being just a motor, you can just spin them round and round and round, and the encoder that monitors its position feeds back, you know, the rotation information. But I believe Will at Boosted Media had one of these apart, and it's because of the way the electronics connects through here and then into the wheel that it has to come to a mechanical stop, otherwise it'd tear itself to pieces. Now that's fine in reality, because there aren't many of us that would drive in a sim racing title with 1080 degrees, you know, let alone more than that. You know, most of us, F1, 360, Dirt Rally 2 will adjust the rotation, degrees of rotation based on the car you're in. Modern rally cars might be low 450, 460. You know, the older 70s and 80s rally cars might be up at 900 or possibly 1080. So it's not really a limitation, but it's just something to point out compared to other direct drive wheels that you can just spin round and round and round. And talking about spinning round and round and round, this is very smooth. Even with no power attached to it, you can't feel, oh no, you can just, yeah, you can actually. If you use two fingers, I haven't actually done it on the shaft before. Like when I was testing this on the rig, I did it using the steering wheel. So today we'll touch the shaft with just my tip and my thumb, and we'll see how it feels. So yes, you can feel the notches. They're not notches. Inside a motor, you've got magnets all around the outside edge. So I'm guessing what you feel, and same with every direct drive wheel, is you feel it just going from one magnet to the other to the other. But in use, and if we just give it a little bit more sort of force and spin it, very, very smooth, comparable to most other direct drive wheels, and perhaps even a little smoother than what some feel without power being applied to them. A lot of these direct drive wheels, when you power them up, they instantly go smooth because you've got your magnetic fields, you know, alive with current at that point. And when they're not powered down, you can very much feel the notchiness. But this is smooth, both in operation and even here, you know, turned off. And they've used quite lightweight materials for the quick. In fact, the whole thing, this is really interesting, right? Because the whole thing, you get a really good feeling of attention to detail and quality as far as the fit and finish goes. But there's an awful lot of plastic that's been used. And you might normally go, oh, they've cheaped out and they've used plastic. But they've used plastic where it's not important what material you use. I.e., this top piece of the wheelbase here is just like a plastic shell. The underneath is a thick steel plate, and that is what your motor is bolted to and what you bolt to your rig. So everything that the forces actually go through is solid steel, and there's just like a shell over the top. I suppose it's a bit like when you think about, you know, a race car that has a chassis and then a non-structural shell put over the top to keep it as light as possible. So yeah, this is all plastic everywhere, and this is actually venting at the front that allows airflow through past the motor. On the back of the wheel here, you know, this is a plastic cover at the back here, and plastic around your buttons and what have you as well, ignoring the metal in the middle, of course. So they've used plastic, you know, I was about to say to keep costs down, but probably to increase profit in reality, because plastic is always cheaper than metal. But they've kept metal construction where necessary. But again, talking about lightweight, the quick release feels very lightweight, but very good. No issues with it at all. It's very solid. There's no, like I say, there's no play in it. There's no problems. You can't actually pull it back unless it's engaged. But by having less rotating mass, i.e. the wheel is perhaps lighter than it could be if this cover was metal, if this was a heavier... one of the things I noticed on the Moser wheel I had here the other week, the quick release was really, really heavy. And it made the steering wheel feel, you know, like, oh, it's really good quality, it's really weighty, but most of the weight was actually just the quick release. Now, from a motor point of view, when you're trying to spin something, especially perhaps from a standstill, and you want to do something quickly, the less rotating mass, the better. So there is an advantage to using plastic where possible, where it's not important, and lightweight materials. You'll get faster force feedback response, and the motor won't have to work as hard as if it was turning a much heavier wheel. And you know, when I say they've used plastic, it's good quality plastic. Let me just give you a little close up of the back of the wheel there. We'll talk about the wheel properly in a minute, but as I'm just yabbering on about the plastic quality, I may as well show you what's on the back there. And then a little look at this as well. The finish is just really, really good. I don't like the way it looks. I think it looks hideous, but that's just my own personal choice. But the finish and the fit is really, really nice. There's no creaky panel gaps. There's no flashing from poorly finished molds during the production process. You know, it's just really well done. And it's almost, I tell you what, having reviewed, you know, a lot of sort of Chinese stuff recently, both with sim racing and VR headsets, it's actually a breath of fresh air to see this sort of level of fit and finish, especially on plastics where, you know, you might say it's not quite as important because it isn't structural. It's just really, really good. You know, the LED strip at the top here, you'll see the LED strip in some footage I might even put up in a second. There's a little screen there as well. Those LEDs are recessed, you can't touch them, and they're individually housed in their own little segments, so you don't get any colour bleed through at all between each of the LEDs. You know, rather than just having individual LEDs poking through that can light bleed everywhere. It's just a nice touch They've really sort of gone, do you know what, we're going to make this look, and well, I say look, they're going to make this feel and finish-wise look as good as they can. As I say, I think it's a horrible, ugly thing. And I also think it's massive as well, considering, you know, it puts out 3 Newton meters more than, say, a CSL-DD or a Moser R9. This is a huge unit. But yeah, again, looks is entirely down to personal preference. On the back, we've got power, 3 USB-A ports, and weirdly, a micro USB port rather than USB-C, which is a bit of a weird choice considering USB-C is a standard these days. Now those USB-A ports, they're not like a USB hub, you can't plug random stuff in there. That's for Logitech accessories like the matching pedals to go into, so you can't just plug random stuff in there. Yeah, the micro USB, weird one, but they have at least made bespoke micro USB cables. It's got this outer sort of piece there that fits really snugly into the back of the wheelbase. Now, not only does that act as strain relief, it just means you're far less likely, well, that is strain relief, to wiggle it out, I was going to say, which is strain relief, because these micro USB plugs are very, very fragile and they break easily. And again, talking about quality, all of these cables, because I've got a couple of USBs here and then the one on the power brick, these are really nice quality. They are soft and super flexible. So they haven't just gone off the shelf USB cables, you know, bought thousands of them from a supplier. They've had not only this bespoke end made, but they've chosen really high quality. This is obviously the outer sheathing. I'm going to assume the cabling inside is equally good quality because it's super flexible and super light. It's almost grippy in its nature. And that was one of the first things I noticed. I was like, oh, that's really nice. You know what cheap cables feel like? Really hard and stiff, you know, and this is the total opposite of that. So micro USB, weird, but very good quality cable. Again, it goes with the fit and finish of everything here. You know, the panel gaps all line up really well. There's no unevenness, there's no sharp edges. It's just, yeah, they've done a really nice job of the fit and finish of everything. We'll have a quick goosey at the power supply. Again, this feels, the plastic on this doesn't compress, it's not squishy, it doesn't creak or crack, it doesn't feel like someone's 3D printed it in their bedroom and then just put it out to market. You know, the rubber feet actually protrude and do their job. And again, they've chosen that same sort of rubbery and really flexible cable to use that matches the USB cable there, which again is a nice touch because, you know, what's going on here? Are these both being made in the same place? Are they really that bespoke that they've gone to town? Because power supply manufacturers may well not make USB cables. I have no clue in this. I'm just thinking out loud. But they do match in their material choice. So that's really nice as well. Power supply details: 48 volts, 6.2 amps, 300 watts. So plenty beefy enough to run this. It's got a little power LED on there to show you that it's turned on. Yeah, nothing to complain about there. Again, good quality fit and finish, and those rubber feet nice and grippy. So build quality, fit, finish, excellent as far as I'm concerned, especially having seen some real subpar stuff recently. Compatibility wise, obviously I've got the Xbox PC version, there is a PlayStation version available too. Anything else we need to talk about on the wheelbase? I've been through the connections, I've shown you a close-up, I've told you the power, showed you the quick release. Oh, we've got a little start and stop or on and off button in reality at the front there. Press it once to turn it on, hold it down to turn it off. One slight annoyance, actually, this LED screen on here, that's where you choose between Xbox or PC. You have to make the choice every single time you power the wheel up. It doesn't remember your choice. Minor niggle, but irritating. Didn't have to be that way. I'm on the latest firmware, of course, and latest drivers during my testing. So to choose when you start up, you use this rotary here and then you click it in to choose Xbox or PC. So in fact, let's have a little look at this wheel now. I've been through the quick release already. We've got magnetic paddle shifters on Hall effect sensors. These have a nice but uninspiring feel and click to them. You know, the paddles themselves remind me very much of the G920 paddles, just not in silver. In fact, if anyone doesn't recognise the look of this wheel, you know this is a Logitech wheel straight away. It literally says, I'm the bigger brother of the G920. It looks almost exactly the same, but we've got black paddles and obviously a couple of clutch paddles added at the bottom here as well. They are smooth and, I mean, there's again uninspiring paddles. They're fine, but there's nothing amazing about them. But they are smooth and they do work just fine, so I have no issues with that. There's no adjustment on these paddles like in or out or anything like that. The wheel itself is leather and it smells absolutely lovely. I could just sit here sniffing my wheel rim like for hours, but I won't. So that's, you know, again, the Logitech use good quality leather. Even their older G series wheels, on most of them, the leather is still going strong. You know, it's just again, decent quality materials, and that is the feeling I'm getting, you know, over this whole thing. The buttons themselves. So I think the rotary encoders feel distinctly average. They do click in, which also feels distinctly average. And then these other buttons that you might call your normal Xbox style buttons also feel distinctly average. They don't feel cheap and bad, but they don't feel exceptional. You know, they're just plastic. They do have a click to them, rather than just the sort of squishy ones that you would have on the G920 or on a game controller. We've got an 8-way little joystick here, also clicky. Again, average quality in feeling, doesn't feel outstanding in any way. Your Xbox button, obviously at the bottom, and then you know some other buttons down here. I think it's 10 in total. And then you've got your little, I think that's aluminium, or is it plastic? I think it's aluminium band at the top there to signify the wheels in the center position. Bit unnecessary because there's so many other things that would tell you the wheel's upside down, like your rotaries would be at the top and not the bottom, and your flat would be at the top and not the bottom. But again, this is where it literally reminds me of a G920 wheel. D-shaped wheel, peculiar choice, being as this currently is the only wheel you can use on here. If you're going to do a one-size-fits-all wheel, ideally it would be round, because that way it's good for rally games, drifting, you know, as well as GT series and F1. You know, it's not a massively D'd or flattened off wheel, but round would have made a little bit more sense. I mean, I don't think it even makes it look nicer, to be honest. But again, personal preference. In fact, to be honest, the wheel is hugely uninspiring as a whole. It just looks like a G920 wheel with a couple of subtle differences. But it is good quality, it is well put together. And one of the other things they've thought about here is if you look down the profile of the wheel, none of the buttons or knobs protrude at all from the wheel. So that means when you are doing rallying or drifting, I mean, look how far I can go before you start seeing anything. Rallying or drifting, you're not going to accidentally catch your 8-way or your rotaries or press any of the buttons. They're very nicely dished in there. So, perfectly good wheel, lovely leather, great assembly quality, average buttons and rotaries, interesting choice to flatten off the bottom, good quick release, perfectly usable magnetic Hall effect paddles and clutches, but uninspiring is how I would describe this wheel. Oh, one thing I will say, you must absolutely wear gloves when using this wheel, because the stitching continues down into where your thumbs go, and it is rough. I started to test this, in fact you'll see it in my video clips, I'm not wearing gloves, and I came off with sore thumbs on the insides there from where they're rubbing on the inside of the wheels here. So you must absolutely wear gloves. On the more high-end wheels that we see in sim racing, there is never any stitching there, and that's for good reason. But again, I'll talk about the quick release. It's just so easy to slot it on, and then the actual mechanism has slid down by itself, and that's it, it's on there. So that all works great. Overall, I absolutely love the fit and the finish and the quality of all the materials they've used here. I think it's excellent, and it does need to be for £1,000. And as I say, it's refreshing after having reviewed a lot of Chinese branded stuff recently that hasn't had this level of fit and finish. But again, Logitech are huge and have huge amounts of money. So they have the ability to spend the time researching, choosing the right materials and getting things finished to a high standard. Whereas smaller companies are more about perhaps boshing them out there, getting them to market and starting to make money. You know, Logitech are in no rush because I imagine they make plenty off all their other products anyway. You know, their gaming mice are particularly popular, for example, as are the other G series of wheels. So that is the build quality, the fit, the finish, the power of the wheel base itself, the sockets at the back, the power supply, the USB cable. Now, what is the driving experience like? I'll stick up some footage of me now racing in a few different sims and you'll see it in use. And again, I'll reiterate, there was no play or movement in the quick release or in the wheel itself. Like again, some of these cheaper, well, not even cheaper, some of these other wheels available from other manufacturers have an awful lot of flex in the wheel itself. This has no flex in this wheel. It is rock solid. And again, in fact, even the old G29 wheel has no flex in it, you know. It's a very basic thing when you're making a force feedback wheel. You know, don't make it so it flexes, but we see it from other wheel manufacturers all the time. So the driving experience was great. The force feedback was smooth, plenty of power. I didn't run it, you know, because I don't typically run, well, I ran it at 11 Newton meters. In fact, I'll interrupt my footage and I'll show you the Logitech G Hub software. To be honest, there's very little to show you with Logitech G Hub software. This is one of the negatives. It actually lacks a lot of the adjustment we find in most manufacturers, you know, software. So here it is. Click on it, and this is all you've got on the left here. Your wheel sensitivity, your operating range, as you can see, it only goes up to 1080, but as I say, that's fine, it's not a problem. Dampener, strength, defaults to 5 Newton meters. Obviously, I turned it up to 11. And like I say, that was, you know, this is like an overall global setting. So if you limit it here, all your sim titles will be limited to what you set it to here. Force feedback filter, enable auto force feedback filter, and then the true force audio effects, which we're going to talk about in a little while. But that is all there is in the settings for the wheel itself. Very little there. And then the only other thing we have is the lighting for the little LED strip that's at the top. You can adjust the brightness and you can adjust how it works, left to right, right to left, inside to outside, outside to inside, or, you know, 5 potential custom settings there. But that's all there is in the G Hub. The only other things you can adjust are then in-game. So a little bit limited there. Would be nice to have a bit more adjustment, as I know some people do like to fiddle around a lot. So we'll continue with my driving footage now. What was nice actually was things like ACC, for example. I plugged this all in and it mapped everything automatically for me. I didn't have to go in, choose my input device and map each pedal and map the steering wheel and map the paddles and map the buttons. It knew what it was and there was a profile there and it used it. And that was a really nice touch. And being able to go, you know, back out of the game into the menus by using the menu button on the steering wheel was a real novelty. And using the little, you know, 8-way hat to go through the menus as well and adjust things and play around was really quite nice. But no, the force feedback itself, plenty strong enough, I would say, for most people. It offers more than a CSL DD or a Moser R9 for comparison, and I think both of those have enough strength for most people, unless you really like high torque on your force feedback. Plenty of detail, very responsive, you know, fast, no noticeable delays between what I think I should be feeling and what I'm feeling. And again, this is all kind of individual perceptions and expectations, but obviously I've driven quite a few different direct drive wheelbases, so I have some idea what I'm talking about. I don't know everything, no one ever does. But yeah, I've got absolutely no complaints with the force feedback at all. You can feel the detail you need to feel. Catching slides was easy, and it was just really smooth as well. Like I say, the overall smoothness of this wheel is great. So that's, you know, that's all fine as far as force feedback and strength and detail and responsiveness. You absolutely spot on, no problems whatsoever there. Great driving experience. One thing we need to talk about is true force. Now, true force, Logitech made a big deal about this at launch with the G923, and the G923, it basically just made the wheelbase rattle and not really do a whole lot. With this, there is a little bit of the same. True force, it calls it high definition next generation force feedback, right? But and vibro tactile, all these sort of gimmicky words to try and make it sound really impressive. Force feedback revolutionized. What it actually seems to be doing, and I haven't taken this apart, so I don't know for 100%, but it seems to be using the motor to try and behave like a tactile transducer. If you're not familiar with tactile transducers, they are effectively speakers without cones. So they're just the magnets and the voice coil with a weight, and they vibrate like a bass shaker, like a butt kicker, for example. That is a tactile transducer. And you would use tactile transducers. I'm a big fan of them. I used to run 4 until I got my motion system. 1 to replicate each wheel of my car. And so as those individual wheels are going over lumps and bumps and curbs and rumble strips, each wheel would vibrate just like it would in real life, or as close to as you can. So that is how tactile transducers actually work. They can also be used to simulate engine vibrations, wheel lockup or ABS, or loss of traction and things like that. It's a great system, and I recommend everyone have at least one, if they can, tactile transducer. It can be quite complicated to set up, so you can go the butt kicker route, which simplifies things a lot. But otherwise, I use the Rekhorn BS200Is. You could just put one under your seat. They're about 50 quid, and then you need an audio amplifier to run them, because they are effectively a speaker with no cone. And even if you just have one under your seat, so that you feel lumps and bumps as you're going over them, like you would in real life. In real life, when you drive a car, if you go over lumps and bumps in the road, it's not felt through the steering wheel. Even if you smash up a high curb, it still isn't felt through the steering wheel. And if you don't believe me, go out in your car and try it, because I have. I got one in my work van once after I was pondering over what you actually feel through the steering wheel and what you don't. And I went banging up and down curbs, up big, like 40-degree grassy banks. I felt nothing through my steering wheel, because it's all absorbed by your tyres, your suspension, and then if you've got electronic power steering, there's even a proper disconnect there as well. So you feel nothing of road texture, lumps, bumps, or vibrations. That you all feel through your seat and through your feet being on the floor of the car. You feel it through the chassis as the car sort of literally moves up and down. You know, as it's hitting things, are raising up and down. Your steering wheel doesn't shake. It really doesn't. Just go out and try it, honestly. So tactile transducers are great. What they seem to be doing is using the motor in here to do tactile transducer type effects. You know, I mean, they literally list them off here. So vibrational effects, road surfaces, terrain changes, tyre contact, weather, that's an interesting one, lets you feel bumps, crashes, blah, blah, blah. So that's all stuff you'd normally put through a tactile transducer, because they are things you would feel through the chassis of your car and through your bum and your feet connected to the vehicle. Your steering wheel wouldn't, you know, drastically move left to right or start wobbling or shaking or vibrating. It's not how it happens. Now, I understand if you don't want to fit a tactile transducer setup, that perhaps having something through the wheelbase would be nice if this is your only form of feedback. But I think it would be better to have just one tactile transducer within the wheelbase. Was it Thrustmaster did the TGFT, TFGT? I can't remember what the hell it is now. They had a big one at the back, but it was only implemented in like one title or something ridiculous. That's a good way of doing things. I don't like the idea of diluting down your force feedback, because whilst they call it tactile force feedback, it's not traditional force feedback, as in, am I losing grip based on the telemetry from the game? You know, how much force is the weight of the wheel increasing because I'm cornering harder, and has it gone light because I've lost traction and things like that. It is audio type vibration effects, so frequencies chosen to effect, not simulate's the wrong word, but give you an effect based on telemetry from the game, but not in your traditional. It doesn't know if it's coming out clear enough really, but it's not your normal force feedback. It's effects. You know, so when you go over rumble strips with True Force on, they do feel greater than they would do without it. But that is an added effect, because again, in real life, if you go over a rumble strip, your car will vibrate, not necessarily the steering wheel directly. You will feel something through the wheel, but the most of it is pronounced because the whole car's shaking and vibrating. I hope that's coming out clearly. But basically, yes, they're using the motor to do tactile transducer effects. Now, I want to put up 2 clips in a second, because the engine vibration they've implemented sounds because you could hear it, and feels absolutely awful. It sounds like there's a mechanical grinding inside my wheelbase. It's like someone's put a piezo speaker in there as a tactile transducer. There's no low rumble like you would get if you were using a tactile transducer, for example. If you have tactile transducer, you have engine rumble on, you have this sort of 30 to 40 hertz rumble, and you just feel it. You're like, oh, I can feel the engine just idling. Feels lovely. This feels and sounds horrible by comparison. And I had to turn it off in the end, because it was just... And you haven't got the tunability that you do using tactile transducers. For example, engine vibration is a good one. You don't want engine vibration on the whole time you're racing, because it dilutes all the other effects, lumps, bumps and road texture, by having this constantly changing and when you've only got one form of tactile feedback, in this case it's the same motor, I believe, that's doing your real force feedback, you're diluting your actual force feedback, which is way more important than feeling an engine vibration. But let me I want to put up a clip now, and there's no, everything you hear here is coming out of my wheelbase. There's no speakers turned on in the room or anything. And this is me just revving the engine at idle in neutral in dirt rally. And this is on 5%, this first clip, so just have a listen. It sounds absolutely horrible, and it's not a nice rumble through the wheelbase. It's a high-pitched, I don't know, grinding, rattling type feeling. It's just not good at all. You can see me putting my hands in different places trying to see if stuff's rattling, and I found that the actual wheel was obviously rattling, but the wheel would be rattling because it's the motor that's doing the vibrations. And then the next clip I'll put up is at 100%. So the first one was at 5, basically almost off, and this next clip is at 100. So have a listen to this. Now that is absolutely horrendous. Now in dirt rally, you've got engine vibration, which is what you hear there, tyre slip and surface texture. You actually have 3 sliders you can adjust. In ACC, there was just True Force audio level or something, because again, it's trying to act like a tactile transducer. So you couldn't turn just the engine vibration off. You had to turn everything up or down simultaneously. At least in dirt rally, you could adjust 3 different levels. Now, I ended up just turning it off completely because, well, I just don't like it. It's just not a good implementation of tactile feedback. If you want tactile feedback, use tactile transducers. This just doesn't seem to work very well. I don't really know what else to say. It sounds horrible. It doesn't feel good. Now, when you're going over like rumble strips and lumps and bumps, that is much more pronounced with True Force on than what it is with it off. But it is just an added effect. And whilst they say they're taking physics telemetry from the game, they are, because that's how tactile transducers work. It just doesn't work well, I think, by using the motor in your direct drive wheelbase to do it. Like I say, I think if anything, you're diluting down the force feedback that is important to you, that your levels of grip and what having the ability to catch slides, because the motor's trying to do lots of different things at once. In fact, it would be a bit like having one speaker try and put out a full range of sound. So let's say we choose a 15-inch speaker. That's going to put out bass really, really well, and it might do mid-range okay as well, but it can't do treble. Your treble would all be horribly muffled like this. Or it would be like getting a 1-inch tweeter. The high-end treble is going to be lovely and crispy clear, but you ask it to do any bass and it can't do it. When you try and get one object to do lots of things at once, it ends up doing none of them well and all of them badly. So I think when you're using the motor here to try and do all these different effects, engine vibrations, surface, tyre slip, rumble strips, whatever, in addition to all the usual force feedback, it detracts from it. So I ended up turning the True Force off and just driving, with it as a traditional force feedback motor. They use a lot of marketing terms here, 1,000 times a second polling rate, so 1 kilohertz, which is how often the data will come back and forth from the sim title. And then further down, internally calculated up to 4,000 hertz, 4 kilohertz, right to your G Pro. And it's like, that's all well and good, but I think it's not the way to go, to be honest, at least for me. I did a bit of reading around to make sure I didn't have like a defective wheel before I made this review, thinking, no, something can't be right because lots of people are saying it's really good. But I guess the issue with that is, if you're not used to a proper tactile transducer setup, whether it's one on each wheel, or whether it's just one butt kicker, or one rec horn under your seat, or maybe one under your seat and one under your pedals, that's a good one for replicating what you feel in real life sat in the seat through your bum and through your feet, then maybe you don't know any different, in which case you're getting extra things you wouldn't have otherwise. And as I say, apart from the engine vibration, which just sounds like my force feedback motor, my direct drive motor, is about to grind itself to pieces, the additional rumble strips and textures and stuff did come across quite well. But as I say, I think personally you're diluting the actual force feedback that we really need and find important about what our car is doing by adding in a whole load of these effects. Again, it's a bit like when you have a tactile transducer set up. If you've just got one tactile transducer, you don't want it to do engine vibration, wheel slip, road texture, ABS, all because the poor thing's trying to do so much at once, it will do none of it well and all of it badly. If you've got one tactile transducer, you're better off just having it do road texture, for example, so you get all your lumps and bumps as you're going along. Engine vibration is not important. Much better to feel when you go over a curb through your bum, or in dirt rally when you do a jump, and it goes silent whilst you're in the air, and then when you hit the ground you get a big thud through your bum. Much better to do that than the poor thing just be trying to put out 6 different channels of tactile feedback through one poor little transducer. That's when you really want multiple channels. You have the one on the wheels, the ones on each 4 wheels to do road surface, texture, lumps and bumps. You could have the one under the seat and under your pedals to do engine vibration at idle, and then you can set that so that once you go over a certain RPM, it stops doing it. That way, at idle, you're sitting there burbling away, ready to go. In fact, you can have all 6 do that. And then once you pull away and you're driving and you don't want your feedback diluted, you have your engine vibrations go off over a certain RPM, and if you want things like wheel slip or wheel lock up, you can have that done at each wheel as it slips or locks up, so you know where stuff's coming from, instead of having it all through one poor transducer stuck under your seat or on the back of your chair or wherever it might be. And that's what I think is really happening here. We're trying to get this motor to do everything all at once, all in one location, all through your hands. It just dilutes things and muddies things up. So for me, True Force is a no-no, and I just in the end turned it off after thoroughly testing it and tweaking the few sliders that are available. There isn't much to play around with, unfortunately. Otherwise maybe I'd have got better results from it, but I just turned True Force off. As I say, the force feedback, the detail, the strength, the response times of the wheelbase itself is excellent and comparable to any other good direct drive wheelbase. So that's great. Got absolutely no problem recommending, this wheelbase with this steering wheel on its own. I just don't like the True Force implementation. And I also, as I say, I also don't like the way it looks. I think it's massive and it's a horrible looking thing, but that's very much personal taste. So, have we covered everything, Carl? That's the question. Let's have a little recap. I've given you a close-up of everything. I've shown you the connections at the back, the way the venting system works, the LCD screen, the RGB LEDs, the on and off button, the steering wheel, the quick release, the connections for that. Spoke about the buttons, the leather, the rotaries, that's all been covered. The power supply, the great quality of the overall construction and everything. The smell of the leather is good. The quality of the USB cables and the power cable. It came nicely packaged. They're over there in the background. Probably can't see them, but not massively important. But yeah, it came really well packaged, no problems there. And again, everything, you get this feeling of quality, even though it is a lot of plastic. But I'll reiterate, they've only used plastic in places where they're effectively just a shell. Anything structural, the base of the base, where the motor is bolted to, absolutely rock solid, no flex. Steering wheel, no, I mean, to be honest, this is probably one of the most solid wheels I've felt in a long time. There is no flex in this wheel at all, and that is just great. So yeah, £1,000. I think it's a little high on the price side of things, but for that you are getting a very nicely put together, good quality wheel and wheelbase. And especially for console users, it's going to be plug and play with no issues whatsoever. Console users can also use the the little LCD screen here for adjusting your settings, and you can see things like your pedal input and what have you on there as well. You'd have seen that in a clip earlier, and if you haven't, I'll put it up now. For us PC users, we have the additional G Hub software, which doesn't really let us do much, but there's something there rather than nothing. So yeah, I think I've pretty much covered everything. These are only available from Logitech at the time of recording, so I will put a link to the Logitech website. It's not affiliated, obviously. I didn't get any, I don't have an affiliate account with Logitech. I had to buy this in myself, so this will be up on Facebook Marketplace for sale in the next couple of days. That's also why I've left some of the little stickers, the little peely things on, so whoever gets it from me can enjoy a good peel themselves. I did take the front one off because I wanted to be able to get good footage of the screens and have a good look at the fit and finish there. But I have left some on for you to peel off yourselves as well. But yes, there we go. That is the Logitech G Pro 11 Nm direct drive force feedback wheel and base. It's decent, but it's expensive, and True Force, in my opinion, is a poor implementation of tactile feedback. As always, thank you very much for watching, and take it easy.